Today we're going to have a bit of fun, but there's a serious insight behind it as well. We're going to be talking about 8 things baby boomers refuse to stop doing that drive younger generations absolutely crazy. Hi, I'm Michael Yardney and welcome to Demographics Decoded, where leading demographer Simon Kirsten and Macha and I unpack the trends shaping our future. Now, you've probably seen all those memes and TikToks poking fun at baby boomer habits, from insisting on paying with cash to overusing ellipses in text messages. But these quirks reveal something deeper about how different generations see the world, and that was shaped by the times they grew up. So whether you're a proud boomer, like I am, a frustrated millennial, or a Gen X rolling your eyes, hey, stick around, because you might just see yourself reflected in this conversation. And if you're an investor, a business owner, or an entrepreneur, it's important to understand how other people see the world. So Simon, today I'd like to explore why boomers behave the way they do. Let's be blunt, we do, how millennials and Gen X, Gen Zs are responding, and what all this actually means for workplaces, housing and society.
Yes, and that's the light-hearted, fun nature of the topic. But as you mentioned, it does really lead us a bit closer to the truth of generational values, of consumer behavior. And that's ultimately, as a business person, as a investor, that's what you are after, is to get a bit closer to what your consumers actually think and care about.
Well, Simon, I came across an article about the 8 things boomers refuse to stop doing that drive younger generations absolutely crazy. And before we get into it, I've got to admit I'm guilty of a number of these things on the list. Now, boomers mean well, but some habits from the good old days just don't land the same anymore. From phone calls to money talk to testing younger generations' patience, the world's changed, Simon.
Yes, it's not so much the world changes, it's simply that each generation grows old with their own particular background and history in mind, and the next generation enters under a new set of technology, economic, social circumstances, and then those two cohorts that were raised with different circumstances, they have to interact with each other. And so there are endless opportunities for intergenerational misunderstandings, if you will.
Well, the article I found, and I'll leave a link in the show notes, was actually, I guess it was written in fun. It was written, I guess, a bit tongue-in-cheek. But why do you think it struck such a chord across generations?
Because there is a certain truth to the story, and you tend to see yourself or your friends, your parents, your kids in this narrative, and I think that's where the truth comes from. You do feel it reflects reality, even if it does so, as you mentioned, tongue in cheek. It does poke fun of the generations, and that's fine. I think humor is an absolute wonderful weapon and tool to understand the world. Yep. So I'm quite a fan of these kind of jokingly narratives, because it's well and truly okay to poke fun of the different generations and just understanding, where people come from. It's part of this ongoing demographic dance that we are.
Well, as a boomer, I remember I used to roll my eyes at my own parents' frugality and boy about their fashions and the way they dressed. I remember when international air flight was still new and my parents eventually were able to afford an international flight. My father would wear a suit and tie, a jacket and tie to travel overseas. Today you do it in your leisure outfit, don't you?
Exactly. And that's just, you interact with things in whatever way you feel is appropriate and whatever you think is the most important argument. So your father would have put effort on this is something special, so you need to dress to the special occasion. Also, you want to show certain kind of outward facing respect, if you will. And today we would be much more focused on maximizing your own comfort during travel.
Yes.
So it would be track pants and hoodies, something like this.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's start with one of the biggest things that boomers still do that drive young Australians mad. And boomers love cash, and some even like checks. I haven't had a checkbook for a long time. Why is it so hard for them to let go of physical money?
So I think the first thing is that you got used to it. Also, you want to think about where we talk about, well, a baby boomer artist, Madonna, thinks about the material girl that she is.
Yes.
and that she lives in a material world. And so that is the kind of thing that you want to keep in mind. So the boomers were essentially the first generation where atheism became a thing at scale. It's the first generation that came out of a parental generation that really suffered financially. They lived through 2 world wars, through a Great Depression. So it's quite understanding that they introduced the importance of materialistic belongings to their kids early on, because this is the stuff that cannot be taken away. And so that's the way of money. So you go, no, I have this. This is a tangible item. And that makes perfect sense. There are, of course, certain comfort limitations that you have with money. You need to have it with you, so to speak. And then digital currency, checks, credit cards, crypto, whatever, all these things are not physical in any real sense. And so it doesn't feel right with boomers. They might not really have a complex explanation for why this might be. Some might have a financial argument about it, but more than anything, it is a gut feeling, and it's a new technology that the younger generations tend to embrace much more wholeheartedly compared to older generations.
Well, I must admit I do carry some cash around, but 90% of the time I pay with my watch or my iPhone, and I'm comfortable with that. But as a boomer, I often wonder, do the younger generations really understand the value of money or what it is if they can't touch it or feel it? So I guess I've got some of that still inside me.
Well, and I have that with young kids, where we're trying to teach them what money actually is, just to exchange money for sweets, for toys, whatever it is. And so it's quite difficult. And I recently was at a house of friends, and the kids, room full of kids, played a shop. So they set up a little shop, and they sold toy vegetables and whatever. And then it was my time to shop, and I asked them to give me money to pretend to shop in the shop. The girl looked at me with absolutely confusion in her eyes and said, "Don't you have a phone?" I was like, "Well,
Yeah,
I guess that's how I'm paying in the shop."
that's right.
And so you see, I think money will not be a main concern for the 4-year-olds of today.
No, you're right. Now, another one that gets lots of laughs is we boomers like to call. We like to use the phone instead of text or WhatsApp or Messenger. What's all that about?
Yeah, I think it is the communication equivalent to a handshake. It is the most honest face-to-face way that you can have when you're not face to face. It is really, you're on the phone, it's quick, it's direct, it's a nice, honest way of communication. And the directness, the immediacy, that is, of course, what boomers value here. Whereas Gen Z might view this as not being in control of their time, that they do whatever they do, and then a phone call is forced on them. So it's much nicer to leave them a WhatsApp voice message, and they can respond in whatever time frame they feel comfortable. And that, of course, is quite difficult when you run an intergenerational workplace where you have those different communication patterns alongside, because in a sense, somebody will feel uncomfortable. And it is kind of natural that the existing leadership, that the more senior people dictate the communication patterns to a larger degree than the young people. That's the kind of hierarchy in the workplace, seniority that plays out. But to a degree, you need to adjust to it. And this young Gen Z cohort, of course, is the first generation that grew up with the ability to constantly text and so forth. So they are much more screen heavy in their upbringing. Their communication pattern is therefore much more text based and then just face to face or phone to phone, audio based. And you need to adjust for that. And I think as an employer these days, when we hire new Gen Z staff, we must invest a bit more time and effort into what I would consider workplace 101 training, where we educate those young folks that that's the way we communicate here. This might seem a bit weird, maybe, if you do this, because you didn't need to do this with previous generations, but previous generations came of age with different technologies. And so once you're now doing this with Gen Z, whether you like it or not, you need to bite into the sour apple. And I think you just need to invest the time and effort into training them up into modern ways. And actually, you need to train them up in old-fashioned ways of communication.
Well, I know a lot of younger generations actually take offense if you ring them. It's a bit like knocking on their door unannounced and turning up. In fact, many don't even leave a voicemail if they ring you, or their voicemail message is, please don't leave me a message. To be honest, I'm not even going to listen to it. So just send
No,
me a text.
I like the point that you made about the door knocking. It was absolutely common. I'm 42, so in my youth, it was still very common just to take the bike to the neighbors' houses and whatever, and just knock on the door and go like, "Hey, can we play?" And so that is extremely rare. So we have a couple of friends only who would just come over unannounced and just knock at the door. And if we're here, we just chat. And if we're not here, they go, well, whatever, no biggie. And so it's just spectacular how rare that is. And I think it's about the availability of, you can avoid the discomfort of not having this person available by
Yep.
texting.
Sure. I can see that. So I guess we've got two different social contracts, one based on immediacy, the older generations, and the other on autonomy. And I guess it's taken me time as a boomer to learn. Neither is right or wrong. They've just evolved as we have evolved in different technological environments. But I think it's really important, as you already pointed out, in the workplace for employers to understand how different generations communicate, and for people in business to understand even how their clients communicate.
Absolutely. And you're really hitting the nail on the head here. It is not about saying one is wrong, one is right. It's the idea to understand that people look at a certain communication pattern differently. And you then, if you are the container that is the workplace, you are responsible to ensure that everyone feels comfortable enough in their communication patterns. And that's, again, easier said than done, especially since we're now phasing out the boomers out of the workforce into retirement more and more, and we introduce more and more young people. So at some point, the patterns will shift again. And you need to just live through that shift.
Well, boomers have gotten used to texting and messaging, but they still do things that the younger generation get frustrated, annoyed by, and that's the dot, 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 the ellipses in text messages. What's the deal about that?
I guess for boomers, it's meant to signify a pause, a sign of thoughtfulness. It's a bit of gentleness. Maybe it shows about their own weakness or uncertainty to a certain degree. And young people might see this as passive aggressive. It's just a fun example how digital communication can lack this shared grammar between generations. So you don't have the same language in texting, even though the symbols are used in both generations. And so that means you then need to adjust what this means. Emojis are now the latest way of that, where certain emojis have an absolutely
Yep.
clear sexual connotation when the young generations use it, and they're absolutely innocent when the older generations use it. Yeah, like the eggplant or the peach. And so these kind of things, it's just beautiful opportunities for humor that just emerges. And again, it's just learning new language patterns. We always spoke about youth language, how that changes, and that is now impacting written speech much more than it did before.
Now, Simon, there's also an obsession with boomers to have physical records, bills, receipts, printed maps. I know my wife Pam likes printing out things, copies of things, when I think I'm a boomer, but I think, oh, you've already got a digital copy. Why have a printed version of it as well?
Yeah, and so I would bring this back to the general upbringing of boomers being the kids of a generation that lived through wars, where things were taken away. And so it's the idea, if it's there, it's real. And you have a clear paper trail that cannot be destroyed in case something happens and so forth. I'm the exact opposite. I want absolutely no belongings. Digital is fine. That's where I want absolutely everything. I once canceled a bank account because they wanted me to go into the bank. I was like, I don't do this. I don't do in person. I don't do printed documents. I want it all digital, and that's it. And so it's a bit petty consumer behavior on my end, to be honest. But it just shows certain kind of differences. Some people value the idea of going to a bank in person, speaking to a trusted person face to face. And I think this must be avoided at all cost. And so that, of course, then makes it very difficult for a bank in that example to service the full spectrum, because you must
Yes.
kind of sort of have both things on offer, because you don't want to miss out on either generation as a customer base. And that's the thing, is like a printed bill. I was like, why?
Yes.
So, but again, that's my understanding, and I know that it's sometimes it's harder to, can just easily be deleted online or whatever. Who knows what the main concerns there are? But I understand the digital obsession very, very much, because I always say my baseline is I want to make sure that I'm not sad at all if all of my belongings go up in flame. I don't want to be bound by physical belongings. I think it's nice to have all the memories digitally. They're on the cloud. If my house burns down, so be it.
I agree with that, even though I am a boomer. Now, one of the things we've discussed in previous episodes of Demographics Decoded is about young people's worth ethics. Now, if you're new to this podcast, today we're doing a bit of a light-hearted chat, but there is clearly a deeper message underneath it for people, whether they're in business or investors wondering who their tenants are going to be or what's going to happen going forward. But we've done a number of episodes in the past about the different generations, what they like, how they work, how they communicate. So first of all, if you're new to this podcast, hey, click the follow button. And in fact, most podcast apps allow you to automatically download future episodes. So you've got it there each Wednesday when Simon and my show comes out. But separately, go back to some of the previous episodes and have a listen because they're each a lesson on their own. But in those, I'm sorry I got sidetracked, Simon, because I do remember we had discussed this topic before about the older generation being a little bit perplexed by the avocado toast generation stereotype. What's going on here demographically?
Well, so there is sometimes you view the current world through the world that you lived through 20, 30 years earlier, and that can create conflict. And so in the avocado stereotype, it's quite a common generational divide. And so essentially boomers, they grew up in an economy where the economy grew, the population grew, housing was relatively affordable, and education was relatively cheap and gave you a good bang for your buck, gave you a good return, pay premium, so to speak. And so the argument worked much more that if you work harder, you get to improve your living standard accordingly. Because an additional $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 each year made all the world of a difference. And this sounds a bit mean, but at the moment, if you give your $75,000 staff member a pay raise to $80,000, it doesn't make much of a difference. It sounds very, very mean, but they would still live in the same unaffordable area. Of course, it makes a difference. It is real money, but it will not lift the life to this whole next new level. So therefore you go, well, why aren't these young people chasing the next promotion as hard as we would have done back in the past? And that's because the additional pay might look very nice, but it's not making that much of an difference because the basics of life are so expensive. And so there's a certain kind of link that broke for the millennials and Gen Z, so that we then create developments like the quiet quitting movement, where people say, how about I don't chase the promotion? How about I just get away with doing the bare minimum at work that I'm contracted to do, and then I try to minimize the time that I work, and then I'd either get a passion project on the side. Maybe I do some sort of gig work on the side, or maybe I just try to maximize my happiness in the spare time that I have outside of work. And that, of course, drives boomers mad because they see then young people eating avocado toast for $25, and they go, dude, you shouldn't do this. If you do this, or if you were not to do this, you would have more money, and that just would lead to housing. This would lead to all the wonderful things that you could purchase. And young people don't see this like this at all. And there is quite a bit of conflict coming there, and that can be rather nasty and personal, because you are, at that sense, not making fun about stuff like fun communication patterns. What kind of symbols do you use when you text? That is all just humorous, but then you question people's lifestyle choices. And that's where people get really, really aggressive about.
I think it's also partly because baby boomers feel we had it tough. They're remembering a different kind of struggle, and so they're wondering, hey, how are you getting away with this? Having said that, I know when we go for brunch every Saturday, Pam's favourite brunch menu is smashed avocado on toast. She'll have a laugh when you listen to this.
No, but it is just that. So a big risk in this generational story is to say, from a younger perspective, for example, to say, you boomers, you have no idea how hard it is. And that's fair, that statement. But if this statement leads to an implication that you had it easy, then the boomers rightfully feel peeved because they said,
Yes.
okay, if I remember this correctly, I worked very hard. I worked long hours and I had financial goals. I wanted to achieve certain kind of milestones, the car, the house, the wedding, the kids, and I worked hard. So don't tell me that I didn't work hard. And that's important. Like, how can we tell about certain kind of social shifts that housing is becoming more unaffordable while not devaluing the efforts of previous generations? And that's where communications need to be rather precise and targeted, and they need to be not personal in nature, because then you're creating boomers as enemies rather than allies in
Yeah.
your reform plans that you might have as the younger generations. And again, nobody is serviced by that, particularly because boomers are, of course, the parents of the millennials. So we have really the children versus the parental generation complaining about a rather important and personal topic of housing in Australia in particular. And that's not helping the Christmas dinner conversations. So yeah, be careful around how you navigate these waters.
Another point of difference is in the workplace, where in the old days, boomers valued loyalty. They'd stay in the one job for a long time, while younger generations seem to job hop constantly. In fact, we've discussed that in one of our previous podcasts about how many jobs you can expect to have over your life, Simon.
Yes, and so I think the idea about loyalty is very important, and that comes back to the idea that boomers were a gigantic cohort when they entered the workforce, so heaps of people competing for a limited number of jobs, and so it was this big token of pride of getting this job in the first place, and it was again a reason to be very proud if you got the golden pin for 10, 20 years of service with your company. And we now tell a very different story to our young people. And of course, the young people enter the world of work under different circumstances. Right now, we have a small cohort entering the world of work in times of low unemployment. And so why wouldn't they view this a bit differently? Why wouldn't they see themselves a bit more empowered, as they can pick and choose what career, what jobs they want to pick? And they have more leverage at the moment. And so you would expect them to make use of this.
Interesting how that's all changing. You're right. Now, one of the other things on the list of what baby boomers do that drive young Australians mad is their love for physical media. Still hoarding DVDs. And actually, as I mentioned it, I can think in our family room, we've got cupboards full of DVDs we bought years ago. We're never going to look at them again. It's all online now. Books, I've got all the books on my bookshelf behind me, even though I now buy books on Kindle. Photo albums. Pam loves printing out the photos, not just having them digitally. What's going on here? Is it just nostalgia?
Yeah, so I think this is where consumer behavior comes in. So part of the idea is cost, part of the idea is space. So if you think about young generations, they now can afford fewer cubic meters of housing than older generations on their pay. And so you would then say, well, it makes perfect sense to get away with one shelf full of DVDs and substitute them with an invisible Netflix subscription. That is actually, from a space perspective, very, very helpful. Even though we must remember that in forecasting, we can always, we know that every trend creates the exact counter trend. So we now see, as everyone is listening to music on Spotify, that you now have the vinyl sales going up because people then value the exact opposite. We know that some of the absolute hardcore cinema buffs want DVDs because they know that every now and then the media catalog that is available in each subscription and each platform, that they change. And sometimes your favorite movie isn't actually on that platform and so forth. And they go, well, that's kind of us not, we're being shortchanged here. Only if you own it, you really own it. And that's what boomers got to see, is things can change. They were raised this way, that a war, a Great Depression can really take things away. But somebody would need to come to your house and physically steal your DVD so that you don't have it anymore. And that's unlikely, I would argue. And so there's a certain kind of nicety to it. Sometimes people just feel that they can look at this in a bit more tangible way. I know that we print photo albums in our family of the nice trips that we take, or the birthdays or whatever, and the kids enjoy it because we wanting to limit screen time to a degree. And so then you go, well, look at the photo albums like
Yeah.
this. Yeah. I see the pros and the cons, but again, you just see a clear shift from one generation to the next, that younger generations tend to have fewer stuff, and that certain kind of stuffs that you used to have in the past, they now moved into the phone, onto the Kindle, onto whatever. So you get away with smaller stuff. And if you look on YouTube, there are those minimalist videos and lifestyle things of people who minimize their number of things down to a bare minimum while still living the full life. And that's just one expression.
Now, Simon, there's a couple more questions I want to ask you about this topic. But before I do, I was just thinking that understanding how the different generations see the world must impact how you, in your role as a demographer, help your clients. Maybe you could just quickly explain what you do and the sort of clients that you help and how this all fits in.
Yeah, understanding the generations, understanding consumer value is a big part of the demographics work that I do, which is mostly presenting at conferences, at events, at board meetings, and writing research reports. And you want to understand what your consumers care about, because what you care about is how you behave, and how your customers behave, or your residents, your citizens behave, is exactly what organizations care about. And when I then try to put all of these things together into a fun, light-hearted narrative on stage. And today is just one little tidbit, insight in what we're doing here.
Well, I'll leave a link in the show notes if people want to get in contact with you at the Demographics Group. Interestingly, in our role at Metropole as strategic property and wealth advisors, demographics is critical as well. I think demographic changes are going to be more important in the future of property than ups and downs, the short-term ups and downs of interest rates or political interference, because you, as an investor, need to own the sort of property that's going to be in continuous strong demand by an affluent demographic in the future. So if you're looking to generate intergenerational wealth, if you're looking to grow, protect, and pass on your wealth, that's what our team at Metropole do. I'll leave a link in the show notes. We're much more than just buyer's agents. We help our clients grow their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. And Simon, at the end of last month, we actually won 3 awards from finder.com.au, including Australia's most trusted buyer's agent and best buyer's agent. So I was very proud of the team.
Very good. Yeah.
It's one of those things we didn't pay for, we didn't even enter, but people voted for us. It was great.
That's the real. So it's a real award, not the awards where just the people who apply get awards.
That's right. So let's just finish off by zooming out. What do all these habits reveal about how different generations see the world, Simon?
Well, what we see is that there are real differences. And what it also shows is that there is a certain truism to the idea that we are all aging. And every generation struggles when they realize that they're getting older. And that then all of a sudden you are the old generation. I have to honestly say, even though I know this, I do this for a living, I was shocked a couple of years ago when the first articles came out written by young Gen Z people. We're talking about teenagers who wrote articles making fun of millennials. And I thought, that's inappropriate. I'm an elder millennial. We are not the people. We are the people who are making the fun of the old people. And then you go, no, wait a second. I'm actually now in my, back then, late 30s. It is absolutely right that you are mocking us. And it's just a reflection of aging. You will go through all those very predictable life stages as you grow older and older, and younger generations will view you with a certain amount of suspicion. That is just it's just a sign that you're getting older, and so be it.
So I guess clearly every generation's habits make perfect sense in their own context. So today's annoying baby boomer behaviors once symbolized progress, just as today's Gen Z trends are going to confuse future generations. Demography, I guess, teaches us that as humans we adapt, but we're never in sync. And that's what keeps our society dynamic and interesting. So, Simon, thank you very much. If you as a viewer or a listener enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Demographics Decoded wherever you listen or watch this podcast. And as I said, you can go back and look at previous episodes as well. And Simon and I only ask you one favor. Please tell one person about this show, somebody who you think would benefit as well, because we love to keep getting our message out to more and more people. Look forward to catching up with you again next week, Simon.
Fantastic. I'll see you soon.
This Demographics Decoded podcast has been brought to you by Metropole Property Strategists. We provide a complete range of services to help our clients safely create intergenerational wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you're looking to buy an investment property or your next home, why not have a discovery chat with one of our wealth strategists? Just go to metropole.com.au and explore your options. You'll find we're much more than just another buyer's agent. We provide a complete range of services, including property advisory, wealth advisory, home buying, buyer's agency, property management, renovations, and development management services. The team at Metropole will help you with frameworks that I've fine-tuned over 5 decades and we've been helping clients with for well over 25 years. We're big enough to tip the scales in your favour, but still small enough to care. In between these demographics decoded shows, you can follow me on social media, and I suggest you also follow Simon Kirstenmacher. You'll find him regularly posting on all social media platforms. And thanks for spending the last little while with Simon and me. I hope you got some benefit from the show. And if you did, and you know somebody who may also benefit, please tell them about Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you're definitely going to be doing us a favour, helping us in our quest to make as many people as possible aware of the demographic changes that are going to be shaping their future. And of course, if you don't currently subscribe, we'd love you to. And of course, any of the information that we've been sharing with you is general information because we don't know your specific circumstances.